In order to understand this lawsuit against P. Diddy, you need to understand the history of sexual blackmail. A lot of people in the comments are misunderstanding why rap music is so anti-gay. And a lot of people understand the ties of Israel and the Mossad to sexual blackmail by Epstein, but a lot of people don't realize the ties of sexual blackmail back to the invention of sexual blackmail and the Jewish mob. So if you don't know what's going on, Diddy, one of the most influential people in the rap industry over the last 30 years, just got served this court case that alleged all kinds of crimes, including murder and drugs and prostitution, but especially having all of his homes wired with cameras and hosting parties with underage girls, rappers, label executives, celebrities, politicians, and collecting sexual blackmail on tons of important people. Like, we're talking Jeffrey Epstein level of operation, but in the music and entertainment industries. But the thing about a court case is that we're only getting the allegations that are in that case, and they're only relevant to what that defendant saw and experienced. And so the bigger picture is not filled in directly. You have to kind of understand the history of this stuff and what each thing might imply about the bigger picture. And that requires an understanding of the history of this stuff. And it's not complicated, and it's a wild story. So, the FBI was founded by J. Edgar Hoover. He actually was the head of the Bureau of Investigation, the BOI, before the FBI was even invented back in the 20s. And he served there for 11 years. Then they invented the FBI, and he served as the head of the FBI for 37 years, totaling 48 years leading what was more or less the FBI. So we're talking like all the way from like the Great Depression through World War II into like the 60s. Like through the 60s music revolution into the 70s. All of that time period, the FBI was led by the same person, and he was one of the most corrupt government officials in all of US history. And understanding the state of organized crime and of law enforcement in America is impossible if you don't know about J. Edgar Hoover. And understanding the nature of sexual blackmail is impossible if you don't know about Meyer Lansky, who was a boss in the Jewish mob back in the 30s, 20s, like the Prohibition days and so on. Meyer Lansky, this Jewish mob boss, basically invented the concept of sexual blackmail. And he did it by sexually blackmailing J. Edgar Hoover, the guy who was explicitly supposed to be taking guys like Meyer Lansky down. The Wikipedia articles are sanitized, but basically Meyer Lansky had a photo of J. Edgar Hoover using his mouth on his main assistant, Clyde Tolson. Realistically, it was his boyfriend. They were a couple. But then, once Hoover was blackmailed, he was like, fuck it, how much worse could it get? And so he started hosting blackmail parties in collusion with these mobsters and inviting all sorts of important people to these blackmail parties to collect his own blackmail. This all happened in what was called the Blue Suite at the Plaza Hotel. And it was basically a bunch of male cross-dressing orgies all caught on camera for like a decade or more. And because Hoover was already blackmailed by the most powerful gangsters in the world, like he didn't give a shit. And he just went and hosted them, and everybody got blackmail on everybody. But the critical piece to understanding the gay aspect of rap music today and the whole situation back with Hoover is that at the time, remember, Cold War, McCarthyism, like we got to get rid of all the communists. There was what was called the Lavender Scare, which is basically just saying that they were all really worried that gay people would get blackmailed by the Soviet Union. And so it wasn't good to be gay, because if you were gay, you could get blackmailed because you wouldn't want anyone to know you were gay. And so don't be gay. And so you should be ashamed of being gay. And so then they'll blackmail. It's like, see, it's like a big circle of how the one creates the other, creates the other, creates the other. Yeah, now think about rap music. All the rappers are super hard and like gay people suck, and then like a bunch of them are gay and they're getting blackmailed about it, and so they rap more about how they're hard and gay people suck, and it creates this little circle. Yeah, the sexual blackmail industry learned early on back in the Cold War that it is much easier to do sexual blackmail in a culture of anti-gayness, because gayness is not wildly uncommon. Lots of people are gay. But the more you can stigmatize it and make it a taboo, the more they have to hide it. And the more easy it is to exploit it when you offer this taboo thing to the people that want it. And then the stronger your power over them is when you have them on film doing it. You feel? So, back to our boy Diddy, who founded his record label when he was only 24 years old. Became one of the most successful record labels of the time. He was able to do that because he was financed and supported by his mentor, Clive Davis, who just happens to be gay and rich and Jewish, just like Meyer Lansky was. And at the time, he was one of the most influential men in the music industry. He managed all kinds of the biggest name artists that you've ever heard of. And he found this guy, Diddy, on the up and up in one of his companies, who we now know from this lawsuit and the other lawsuit filed by his ex-girlfriend, Cassie, which is horrific, disgusting, not a good read. We know that Diddy has some real effed up sexual proclivities, as well as just generally probably being at least gay or bi, one of the two. So Clive Davis finds this guy with questionable morals, questionable sexual habits, and ready to go fucking crazy whatever. Like, he's willing to shoot people. He's willing to launder money. He's willing to do crazy drugs. He's willing to do basically anything. This is just me speculating on Clive here, on his motivations, but Clive mentored Diddy, and Clive brought him up, and Clive elevated him to a record executive by helping him found his label, Bad Boy Records. That was Clive's move. He did that. And then Diddy, along with a lot of help from a lot of other people all around him, proceeded to do 30 years worth of sexual blackmail operations within the rap industry and promoted artists that seem to have been ensnared in it, like Usher, for example, like Meek Mills. Hell, even Justin Bieber is like directly in this storyline. And so what you wind up with is a rap industry, a music industry that is full of people that are creating the types of music that the people above them, that the people that hire them, that the people that manage them want them to make. They're all terrified of stepping on the wrong toes or getting out of line or doing what they're not supposed to for one blackmail reason or the other. And we wind up with an entire industry full of musicians that are glorifying gangs and violence and sex and drugs. I mean, think about it. There's no better way to undermine an entire population, an entire race, an entire culture, than to target their kids with subversive messages that they're going to think is cool, and the parents can't say shit about it because then the kids will just think it's cooler. So why would they be doing this, you ask? That's a really good question. Gonna have to wait for another video for that one.